Today we're diving into a really fascinating, kind of radical idea from ancient history. It's called the Jubilee, and it's a thought experiment that could completely flip how we think about wealth, competition, and maybe society itself.
So just imagine for a second. What if our entire economic system wasn't this single, endless marathon where whoever gets an early lead just gets further and further ahead forever? What if instead it was more like a series of seasons in a sport, where every so often the scoreboard gets wiped clean?
To really get what the Jubilee is all about, we first have to understand the game we're all playing right now. Let's call it the infinite war game, where basically any advantage you get just snowballs forever.
Yeah, in a game with no reset button, those early wins can lead to permanent domination. Wealth just piles up in one corner, power gets concentrated, and, resentments can fester for generations. Without some kind of release valve, the whole system can get pretty unstable.
Okay, so this is the core difference we're digging into. On one hand, you've got our current system, an endless game of just piling up more and more. But on the other hand, the Jubilee proposes something totally different, a game of temporary advantages, built around these big strategic resets.
So what is this radical rule change? Well, let's pull back the curtain on the Jubilee Reset.
So this idea actually comes from ancient biblical law. The basic concept was, every 50 years, society would just hit this massive reset button. All debts, forgiven. All land, returned to its original owners. Any slaves, freed. The whole point, really, is that it prevents any advantage or disadvantage from becoming permanent.
Now, that all sounds pretty abstract, I know. So let's make it super concrete. We're going to run a simple little simulation with 3 players, just to see the incredible difference this one little rule change can make over time.
All right, here's our first scenario. No Jubilee. All 3 players start out even, with 10 units of wealth. But pretty quickly, player A gets a few early wins, and that advantage just snowballs. Look at year 20. They've got 28 units, while player B is almost completely wiped out with just 2. The inequality just keeps growing and growing with no end in sight.
Okay, now let's rewind and do it again. But this time, let's add a Jubilee reset every 5 years. So, player A still gets ahead in those first few years, no doubt. But then, boom, year 5 hits. Everybody gets reset back to 10. The game just starts over. So after 4 of these resets, by year 20, they're all right back where they started, on equal footing.
And when you look at the final outcomes side by side like this, the difference is just wild. Without the Jubilee, you get this runaway inequality. With it, you maintain long-term stability. The competition is still there, absolutely, but its most destructive effects are kept in check.
So, when you change the rules this dramatically, it's not just the outcome that changes, your whole strategy has to change too. If you can't just pile up wealth forever, what actually becomes valuable?
One of the most interesting effects is what it does to risk. If you know that a catastrophic loss won't follow you around for the rest of your life, you're probably way more likely to take some bold, calculated risks. The fear of permanent ruin is basically gone, which could lead to a much more dynamic, much more innovative society inside each cycle.
And this forces a really fascinating shift in what we even consider valuable. If you can't hoard wealth or land forever, what do you invest in? Well, you invest in the things that can actually survive a reset. Things like your skills, your knowledge, your relationships, your alliances. And you'd probably focus a lot less on just owning something and a lot more on making it as productive as you possibly can within the current cycle.
So this brings us to the real philosophical heart of the Jubilee. It's not about getting rid of competition, not at all. It's about changing its very nature, turning it from something that can be destructive into something that's actually sustainable. The Jubilee completely reframes the entire game. It takes what could be an endless zero-sum war and turns it into a structured sport that has seasons. The competition is still fierce, strategy is still everything, but it all happens inside a framework that makes sure the game itself can keep going. I absolutely love this quote from the source material because it captures the whole idea so perfectly. You get to keep all that dynamic energy of competition, but you put a boundary around its most dangerous destabilizing parts. It's a mechanism for containment.
And it's not just an economic reset, it's a psychological one too. Think about it. Long-held grudges over debt or some loss, they're just wiped away. Social trust gets a chance to be renewed. It reinforces this idea that everyone's in it together, which can build a huge amount of social cohesion.
And that leaves us with one last big question. In a world with a reset button, a world where permanent wealth isn't the end-all be-all, what would we compete for then? What would become the new measure of success? It's a fascinating thing to think about.